Okay, so with this question, in order to isolate the absolute value, what am I supposed to do? Subtract 8 on both sides. So these two cancels out. What is 5 minus 8? Negative 3 is equal to the absolute value of 9y plus 8. Now, we isolated the absolute value sign, the term, and it's equal to a negative number. So what's my answer then? No solution, because we just talked about this. Absolute values cannot produce negative numbers, right? So whenever we have a case like this, we're just going to put no solution for these problems. Make sense? Yes.
Why is it 9y plus 8?
That's what it comes from the problem. We didn't change it.
You can check the road. Yeah, it's supposed to be.
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. I still didn't see when you asked it. It's 9y plus 3. Yeah, we don't change it. Yes, thank you. Okay, now when I go back to our homework, finally, homework switches to the second objective of this lesson. Second objective for this lesson is we can solve radical equations. I can solve radical equations. So I put 4 questions from absolute value equations and 4 problems from radical equations. And this is our first one that we're going to remember how to solve them. Okay, what's the first step with radical equations? We need to isolate it. Is it isolated in this problem already? What bothers the radical person? The 8, right? The 8 needs to go to the other side. How can the 8 go to the other side? Not yet. We have to first get rid of the 8. We're going to subtract 8 on both sides. So the positive 8 and negative 8 cancels out on the right side. And what's the only thing left on the right side? Square root of 8 minus 7x. This is the only thing we want on the right side. And now what is 2 minus 8? Negative 6. So step number 1 is done. We isolated the radical. Once the radical is isolated with these problems, always we have to do what next? We need to square both sides. Both sides must be squared. Now, you guys are telling me what happens when you square the negative 6. Negative 6 squared is a 36. And then when you square this radical, what happens? Radical disappears, and what's the only thing we're going to see? 8 minus 7x. How hard it is to solve this linear equation here? Is it hard? Nope. What's the next step I should be doing? Subtract 8 on both sides. What's 36 minus 8? 28 is equal to a negative 7x. How is the x going to be isolated? Divide each side by negative 7. X is equal to what number? Negative 4 is the answer. X equals negative 4 will be the answer for this problem. But am I going to go ahead and accept this? It's best if you plug it in and check. But since this is the one which has only one x, it'll work. But the other problems where we had the x in the radical and outside the radical, those are the cases that you have to check, okay? But this one, it's okay. Even if you don't check it, you know that this is going to work, okay? What questions do you guys have with the radical equations?
I think it would probably be the one where you have to do it
two solutions, Dawn. Okay. All right, this is another one. Okay, solve square root of 12x plus 96 is equal to x plus 8. What's the first question we need to ask? Is the radical isolated? Yes. If it is isolated, it allows us to square both sides. So I'm ready to go ahead and square both sides. Therefore, I'm putting each side in a parentheses and raising them to the second power. Now, what happens when you square the first side? Radical disappears, and the only thing we get is 12x plus 96. Now, is this x squared plus 64? What am I going to do here? We're going to write x plus 8, and then we will write x plus 8 one more time because we're going to FOIL it, right? X times x is x squared. X times 8 is 8x. 8 times x is 8x. And 8 times 8 will be a 64. Which ones are the like terms here? When you add them up, what do they give you? 16x. So here we just need to copy x squared plus these two will give me a 16x plus 64. So after this, what am I supposed to do? We're going to move everything to one side because we want to set them to a 0. What's the purpose for that? Because we're going to get a quadratic equation which we can factor, right? All right, where shall I collect all the terms? Are we going to collect them all on the right side or are we going to collect them all on the left side? Wherever the x squared is, right? We're going to get stuck wherever the x squared is. He is here, so I'm copying x squared here. And then we already have a positive 16x next to him, but another x term needs to come. What is coming? 12x will be moving as negative 12x. Good job. I already have a plus 64 on this side, but somebody else will be coming. Who is coming? 96 is going to come as negative 96. Since we moved everything from this side, so I'm going to put a big 0 on the left side. Now let's organize what we got here. We have an x squared, positive 16x and 12x. When I combine them, what do they give me? Is it negative 4x or positive 4x? It's positive 4x because 16 is bigger and it's a positive number. So this will be a 4x. And 64 minus 96 will be a negative 32, I believe. Now, this is a very nice quadratic equation that we can factor. What are those two magical numbers that I need here? Good job. X plus 8 and x minus 4. Because when you multiply these two numbers, it's a negative 32. And when you add them up, it's a positive 4. This will give you x equals what? Negative 8. This will give you x equals 4. Which one is easy to check? 4. Let's just quickly check the 4. 12 times 4 is 48. 48 plus 96. 48 plus 96. Is it 144? Yeah, 144. Square root of 144 is 12. And then when I put the 4 on the other side, 4 plus 8 is 12. Good job. So this one works. Again, this checking part, you don't have to do mentally. You can take a piece of paper, you can plug it into the original equation, and you can check if it works. But now let's check the negative 8. 12 times negative 8 is negative 96. Negative 96 plus 96 is a 0. Square root of 0 is 0. When I put this number on the other side, negative 8 plus 8 is also a 0. So this one also works. Remember your friend was keep asking me on the college algebra class, if it's a negative number, can I just stop worrying about it and not accept? But this is a very good example that sometimes negative numbers can also be your solutions. The whole idea is when you plug it into the main equation, it has to work, all right?
Can you explain how the negative 8 works?
Yeah, let's check again. Let's check negative 8. Therefore, I will copy the main equation one more time on the next page. And then we want to check if negative 8 can be an answer. So I have a square root sign. I have a 12. Instead of x, what number do I need to plug in? Negative 8, right? Negative 8. And then this continues as plus 96. And we want to check if this is equal to x plus 8. So instead of x, what am I going to write? Negative 8 plus 8. So 12 times negative 8 is a negative 96. And I have a plus 96. And I want to check if they are equal to, what's negative 8 plus 8? 0. These two also add up to a 0. So I have a square root of 0 here. And I'm going to decide if it is equal to a 0. And square root of 0 is just a 0. So even negative 8 works in this problem. So this question has two solutions because when we plug it in, they both work. All right? Any questions? Yes.
So, after 0 equals x squared plus 4x minus 32, how do we get to the next step?
The factoring part. So this is a quadratic equation. So we said we're going to look at the negative 32, and we will need two numbers. When we multiply them, it gives us a negative 32. When we add them up, they give me a plus 4. All right, how is it going? Anybody has any questions? All right, number 7. Very similar, very similar. And now this might be the last question. We can do it together here. Then I can probably stop the recording since I'm running out of minutes. All right. It's very similar to what we just finished. What's the first question I need to ask? Is it isolated? What's your answer? Who is extra here? How can I move him? Add 3 on both sides. So the negative 3 and positive 3 will cancel out. And we just isolated our radical. So we got radical 3b plus 19 is equal to b plus 3. That's what I'm seeing on the right side, b plus 3. Once the radical is isolated, what are we going to do next? Square both sides. Okay. Is it hard to square the square root? Not at all. The power 2 is going to cancel what? The radical. And what's the only thing we always get? 3b plus 19. But then this is the part we have to work a little bit extra, right? You can definitely write them out and FOIL them, but there's also a shortcut. Square the first one, b squared. Multiply them, b times 3 is 3b. Always double them, which becomes 6b. And then square the 3, which becomes 9. Let me put the formula here. Whenever you are squaring a plus b, the formula is a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. Basically, take your first one, square it. So my first one was a b here, so I squared it and I got b squared. This one says just multiply 2 times your first number and your second number. So 2 times my first number and my second number. So 2 times 3 makes it 6 and times b, plus my second number squared. So my second number is here 3. So when I square it, it becomes a 9. But if this doesn't make sense to you, you are very welcome to write out b plus 3 times b plus 3. You will eventually find the same answer. After this, what are we supposed to do? Set up a quadratic equation. Where do we stay? We stay where b squared is located, right? And then we already have a plus 6b here. Who's going to move? 3b is going to move as negative 3b. We already have a plus 9 here. Who's going to move? As negative 19. So we can set them to what number? 0. So I got b squared plus 3b minus 10 equals to a 0. This is the quadratic equation we need to solve. Although we can solve it with quadratic formula, what's the smarter way here? Use factoring. Can you guys find these two magic numbers that we need here? We have a negative 10. What two magical numbers I need here? B plus 5 and B minus 2. Look, positive 5 and negative 2. When you multiply positive 5 and negative 2, what do you guys get? Negative 10. When you add the positive 5 and negative 2, do you get a 3? Yes. These are the factors. So B must be equal to what number then? Negative 5. And B must be equal to what number? 2. Now we're going to check because we might not have to accept both of the answers. Let's plug in negative 5. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. Plus 19 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. And negative 1 is not equal to a negative 5. So negative 5 does not work. If you don't believe me, you can definitely put this on a piece of paper and plug it in. You will understand. When we plug in 2, 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 19 is 25. Square root of 25 is 5. 5 minus 3 is 2. And 2 is equal to 2. And 2 does work. So the only answer here is 2.